Some of you may not realize it, but every part in this church building has its own name. Up here, where the altar and the tabernacle are, is called the sanctuary, the holy place. Our periphery area, where people can walk around, is the ambulatory. And where you are, sitting there in your pews, is called the nave. And the word nave comes from the Latin navis, which means boat. The word navy comes from there, and the word nauseated also comes from there. And that happens depending on who's preaching, I guess, at the time. The reason I think of the nave today is because of our gospel. It's all about being in a boat. Here we are in the nave, the boat of the church of the disciples of Jesus. And what happens? It's a very interesting thing that's going on there. Jesus says, cross over to the other side. They're at the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Sea of Galilee is not very large. It would take at most an hour rowing a boat to cross. And he's with experienced fishermen. And if it's that small of an area, they would have noticed that storms were coming. And why do they go? They go because Jesus said to go. But why did he tell them to go if they were going to row out into a storm? Well, first of all, because there is in all of Jesus' preaching a sense of urgency. Jesus only has so many years for him to preach the good news from town to town to town. And so he says, we put out to the other side and we will bring the good news of God to them. And so there's this sense that if we have to do this because it's time to do it, the people are there, we're going to get to them. But there's more to it. Jesus perhaps even purposefully sends them out into the storm. He's with them after all, because it's important for those early disciples and for us too to realize that life can be stormy. They're going to be persecuted. They're going to undergo a lot of difficult situations because people misunderstand them or even hate them. And it's part of life to weather those storms. But there's one more thing, and that's the wonderful final question Jesus asks about faith, is that if Jesus is with them in the boat, asleep or not, he's with them. And so it's important for those disciples to say, wait a minute, we can be in a storm or we can be in a hurricane. Jesus is with us. And to ask, don't you care, is missing the point that he's with them all the time and taking care of them. So the disciples have this wonderful, and I'm sure frightening lesson as they urgently go to the other side, go into a storm which seems to be almost capsizing their boat, and then Jesus seems to be kind of rebuking them about, why don't you have more faith? What's the matter with you people? Bring it down to us. I think sometimes we forget about the urgency of the message of Jesus and what it means for each of us. Because the good news is that Jesus is here for everybody, that we are saved by him, and that we are loved by him. And the urgency is that our lives have to show that. Our lives have to show that our lives are better because we have a relationship with Jesus. And the urgency is that basically, if not us, who? And if not now, when? If we keep putting it off and saying, well, someday I'll get into my faith, and someday I'll show people that I really care about my spirituality, and someday I'll say good things to people. No, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for the Christian. Jesus shows urgency in his ministry and asks us to follow him. But there is more, isn't there? As those disciples rode out into that storm, we're also going to find storms. Our lives are going to have a lot of stormy times, difficult times, times we don't understand, times that hurt us. And we are going to have to somehow weather those. And the real way for the believer to weather those is knowing that Jesus is there with us in the boat as we go through that storm. Even if he seems sleeping and not paying attention to us, he's there. And he's there to heal us and to take care of us and watch over us. And I often think of Jesus in that boat, and they're all saying, he's asleep, he's asleep. I wonder if he had one eye open, watching what they were doing, calling them to really trust that he was just there. And that's enough, that Jesus is there during those very stormy times. And then finally, the deepening of faith, that we really do believe and trust and act as God's people because we have that relationship with Jesus. It changes who we are. It gives our lives force, and it gives our lives joy. Today, then, as we hear this wonderful gospel about this storm out on the lake, on the Sea of Galilee, those people, you can understand, scared, wondering why they went out in the first place. Why did Jesus say, do this? They did it. Why into the storm? And why did Jesus say, why are you terrified? They're scared. And then at the end, Jesus calls them to faith. It's basically a wonderful lesson. And the same thing for us, that we're going to have to go out into stormy times that we never would have chosen. We're going to lose people we love. We're going to go through situations in life that are very painful. And all through that, Jesus is in the boat with us, letting us know we are loved, we are cared for, and he's there to heal us. Today, then, in our nave here, let us remember that we're all in the boat together, but more importantly, Jesus is with all of us. And he's saying, do not be afraid. I am with you.